Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I have a lot for you. First of all, CNET's Sherr is here to talk about the Xbox Games Showcase. What was announced? What was shown? What can we expect? There's a lot, and Sherr gets into all of it. Then we talk to OneZero's Dave Gershgorn. That's right, he's back to tell us about thermal cameras that are hoping to track and identify fevers in potential COVID-19 sufferers. We round things out with Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner to talk about Twitter. What's going on right now? What is the update on the hack, and so much more. I mean, Twitter's always in the news. And then our stories of the week, including new things from Plex and, well, Instacart potentially, maybe, possibly suffering a breach. It's all that and so much more coming up on Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from TWiT's LastPass Studios. Stay in control when it comes to your company's access points and authentication. LastPass makes security simple for your remote workforce. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 143, recorded Thursday, July 23rd, 2020.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. Like expired milk, 30% of your customers' data goes bad every year. That's money down the drain. Visit Melissa's developer portal for free access to data quality APIs, demos, and code samples. Freshen up your sour data today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit.
And by Monday.com. Monday.com is a flexible platform to manage any team project or workflow online. Collaborate, plan, and track everything your team is working on wherever you are. Learn more at Monday.com/twit.
And by Barracuda. Did you know that 91% of all cyber attacks start with an email? Well, to uncover the threats hiding in your Office 365 account, get a secure and free email threat scan at barracuda.com/TNW. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
I'm the other one when you can hear me and my internet is cooperating. I'm Jason Howell. Comcast Business is right around the corner, by the way, so we won't have to deal with this very soon. But my goodness, internet sometimes just totally sucks.
Yeah, and you just feel powerless. There's nothing you can really do about it. And I don't know about you, but that's what makes it so frustrating. It's like, I wish I could put something somewhere and make this work.
All right, so what happened today? Well, we've got Microsoft happening today. They held an Xbox Games Showcase stream this morning, and there was a ton of gameplay footage, next-gen gameplay footage shared, which will, of course, be explored deeply when the new console comes out. That's the Xbox Series X. That happens sometime later this year. Sherr from CNET followed along during the live event and joins us to talk about it. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing awesome. It's great to have you back. So you were following along with this live stream as I was, and I actually had checked out the PlayStation stream, which I think was about a month ago. So this really reminded me of that in many ways. It's kind of the same type of deal, like get excited about our games. Here's what we have coming up, but here's just a little bit of extra information you didn't already know. Let's start off with the titles. Like, are you an Xbox fan? Are there titles here that they revealed today that get you excited? What should we know about?
Yeah, well, I have all of it. So I've definitely spent a lot of time on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, and so on. So I think that what's really interesting is that Microsoft is trying to push this idea that, a lot of people criticize them for a long time of not having enough exclusive games, which is something Sony invested a lot in the last generation. And so now this time today, I think they showed off something like 22 what they call launch exclusives. So they're, just pushing down the door. And it includes games like Halo Infinite, right, which is the big gun, Fable, which is a well-liked game from many years ago, State of Decay, which is a zombie game, again, a popular title, Forza, the driving game, again. So you can kind of see a theme, right? Not only are they making sure that they've got a bunch of games people like, but they're also taking out the big guns for getting people's attention, because Sony has done such a good job in the last generation of doing that.
Yeah, indeed. And there was a lot to get excited about. Like you mentioned, the Halo game, that's going to be the one that, all eyeballs are on. It's been a little while that people have been waiting for this. And I don't know, did that kind of preview into Halo jump out at you as very different? It's probably promising a lot of what people have come to expect, just it looks so much more marvelous.
Yeah, it's funny. The thing I remember, I spent 6 months with the Halo team back when they were doing Halo 4, when I did a story for the Wall Street Journal about it before I joined CNET. And one of the things that we talked about was that it took them a while. It was the first game they built without Bungie, right? After Bungie had split off and started on Destiny. And they said the biggest thing they wanted to do was build a Halo game, just to prove that they could do it in the first place. And I feel like that was what it felt like today. It felt like a Halo game. Like, it didn't surprise me in any way that it wasn't a Halo game. So that's a plus for them. There was definitely a lot of visual, complexity and all of that stuff you expect from a Halo game. But, one of the things that I think they also tried to do was show us some new stuff, a lot more kind of visual flourish, a lot more of the energy weapons and stuff that people might be excited by. A little bit of story that if you don't know what happened, you're completely in the dark and you don't understand, but that's okay. And, I think that people who are fans are excited, and people who are not into Halo at this point are not going to be drug along, because there was a lot of inside baseball in that demo that they showed.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I mean, obviously there are a lot of games. We don't need to talk about all the games. I think what's interesting, though, is that we're hearing a lot about kind of the Game Pass hooks here. Yes. Talk a little bit about how heavily Microsoft seems to be leaning in to Game Pass and what that might mean as we get closer to this release of the next console, which, I mean, as far as I can tell through what we know about Gamecast, really doesn't require you to have the console at all, right? Like, you could just do this on a PC and have access to a lot of the games you saw today anyways.
Yeah, so it's a really fascinating thing that's happened. I remember when Xbox Game Pass first came out a few years ago, and people were like, we'll see whether Microsoft keeps with the price. $9.99 seemed really low to a lot of people. They're like, they'll hike it up to $50 at some point. And they never did, and they started adding more games. And then they added the PC element so that you not only have Game Pass for the console, but you have Game Pass for the PC, and you pay a monthly fee and you get access to all these games. And then last year they came out with the Game Pass Ultimate version, which gives you access to the PC and the console together, and Xbox Live, which is the whole playing with other people. And it's $15 a month, and people seem to really like it. Every time I hear about it on the web from some of Microsoft's biggest critics, they all say this is one of the best deals in gaming, because you've got like 200 games or something that you're able to access between the PC and the console. And as you point out, when the next generation console, the Series X, comes out later this year, you're not going to have it to be able to play some of these games. They'll just be on Xbox Games Pass. And as long as they're available for a PC, you win. It's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, no kidding. Very, very enticing. The bar is being lowered so much for people who don't want to spend the money on a console. Of course, Stadia is another example of this. There's a lot of options here that we did not have a couple of years ago. That's really appealing for the person who just doesn't want to spend $300, $400, $500 for a console right out of the gate just to participate and then get games on top of that. Which, speaking of release dates and that sort of stuff, did we get any details as far as obviously I know we don't have a specific date, but I think I saw holidays snuck in there, which is what Sony's doing with their PlayStation launch. So we still don't know any specifics as far as this is concerned, but it really strikes me that it seems like a game of cat and mouse Or like, you know, one of them wants to release when, or neither one of them wants to release how much.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually asked Xbox head Phil Spencer about this because, you know, of course, when I spoke to him last week, I had to ask him what the price was and the date that it was coming out. And he appreciated that I asked, even though he chuckled at me. And one of the things I said is I found it really funny that there's this talk on the internet about the cat and mouse game between Sony and Microsoft, who's going to blink first and lose the game of chicken. And he said, you know, that's not what they're trying to do, which you can believe him or not. They just want to kind of build the hype their way. Which, you know, okay, maybe that's true. But it is leaving us all kind of wondering, well, when will it come out? Both he and Microsoft CFO have said that they are definitely going to hit their launch date. And Sony has said the same thing. There's a lot of debate about whether there'll be enough of them. And then there's a question about how much they're going to charge. And both Sony and Microsoft seem to have an understanding that the economy's in a tough spot. This is a time when people are starting to question whether they even want to own a console anymore. And those types of things are things that I think that they're actually trying to figure out as they're figuring out the price and everything and how they're going to position it. And you may remember, Microsoft, you can pay a monthly fee and get an Xbox, and that's it. Like, you don't have to put money down on it. And Sony, I believe, is starting to do something similar. I forget. But it's very clear these companies realize they need to come up with other ways to convince people to buy a box to go under their TV.
Yeah. Now, one way to convince people to buy your box or virtual box, you know, in the cloud or however you want to put it, is to have a good amount of really hot exclusives. Obviously, we talked about Halo as being a really great exclusive. How many exclusives are we going to be looking forward to when this console supposedly releases sometime later this year? And like, does that stack up to what we know about the PlayStation offerings?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like, these people throw out numbers that are hard for me to even wrap my head around. Like, I remember last year, Microsoft said they had shown us 50 new games at E3. And I'm like, going through my head, I'm like, was it really 50? Maybe there was like a quick one. But that's what, I mean, the thing is that a lot of this is about the speeds and feeds, right? It's about having the bigger number than the other guy. And I totally respect that Microsoft feels sensitive about making sure people feel like they're not just selling a Halo box and then a thing that plays everyone else's games. They want to say, hey, we have exclusives too. So they said they have 22 launch exclusives, and we'll see whether that's something that actually stacks up in a way people would expect, right? Some of them are going to be kind of these lower tier games that maybe are not as popular, but review well and are have their own little cult followings, and that's cool. Sony definitely has some big guns of its own. The biggest one probably is that they've announced that the next Spider-Man game, which is the one that focuses around Miles Morales, that one is going to be launching with the PS5. So we've got kind of, you know, Master Chief against Spider-Man. We'll see who wins. But, you know, I think that those are the two that really matter this time. And then next year, we're going to have another set of really high profile games. The rest of them, you know, maybe it matters to the hardcore fans, but everyone else, they're really thinking about Halo and Spider-Man. That's it.
Master Chief versus Spider-Man. I see a combination game coming out of that. I'm not sure if it's a fighting game or what it is, but I like the idea of that.
Nintendo could make it. Then it's, you know, even it's like Switzerland.
Yeah, totally. We'd have everyone covered at that point. So then speaking of kind of like the compelling offering, now we're learning more about both of these platforms. They're both releasing it about the same time. You know, there's a lot of similarity between what's going on both sides of the camp. Which one has you most intrigued and interested? Which is the one that you're like, all right, that's the most compelling one?
I have my reasons for both of them, honestly. I think that I'm really curious to see how Sony keeps its momentum up from the last generation, because they really knocked it out of the park, right? The PS4 is one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and they have had some really successful games. You know, The Last of Us Part 2, one of the best-selling games ever made. You've got games like Spider-Man, which did incredibly well, and a lot of us expected to be a campy mess, and it turned into a really successful game. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out for them the next generation, whether they can keep that going. With Microsoft, they are very clearly planning for a point where it no longer matters if I'm buying a console. And the fight that's ending up between them philosophically, which there's always one for every new generation, is whether or not we need a new generation or whether we can just, have an Xbox Series X that does slightly nicer looking visuals than the Xbox One S, which you can still buy and all of that. Or you say PS5 only, you have to buy that to play these games. And that's what I'm intrigued by, is to see how gamers land on that. And then ultimately in 5-7 years, whether we're going to buy another console or whether this is it. And we're just gaming on the Sony social network and the Microsoft social network. And that's what really matters. It's going to be fascinating.
All right, well, that's a lot to take in. I'm definitely looking forward to the next console. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today. Ian Sherr is with CNET.com. Ian, if people want to follow you online, where can they do so?
It's really simple. I'm at every social network under the name Ian Sherr, even the gaming ones. I just keep it simple.
Ian Sherr. Thank you so much, Ian. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right, folks, the novel coronavirus has fostered the rapid development of a new and it's quite thriving and interesting type of technology. It is the fever camera. We will talk about that in just a moment. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. Ever forgotten to check the date on a carton of milk? Like milk, your customer data goes bad. In fact, up to 30% of customer data goes bad each year. And Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Melissa's tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. You can identify your customers and get to know them. You can add consumer demographic information to your records, such as property and mortgage data, even marital status or social media handles. Melissa will fill in the gaps by adding emails and phone numbers. Identifying current customers easily allows you to find new prospective customers through Melissa's prospect database. You can verify your addresses, your emails, your phone numbers, and names in real time. Incorrect data entered by customers, simple human error, or duplicate records make it easy for bad data to find its way into your system. That's where Melissa comes in and can help you verify your data at the point of entry. You can match and consolidate your records. Melissa's matching and deduplication tools help you uncover, merge, and purge, I love that rhyme, hard to find duplicate records for an accurate 360-degree view of your customers. Its flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. And with flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options, you can choose the best way to meet your unique business needs. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce its commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. In fact, it has the utmost dedication to your data security by implementing strong controls and safeguards when processing your data. Over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Trust Melissa to be your foundation for data-driven success. Melissa is supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19 so you can see if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. Don't put up with sour customer contact data. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. And I can confirm that because I went in there and played with it myself, and it was kind of fun. So you should definitely do that. You can get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. Our thanks to Melissa for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. I have to tell you, I'm really excited about this next story because the other day I had to go into the doctor's office in person for a blood draw. And as I was walking in, you walk up and they make sure you're wearing a mask, and then they have you go to these little stations where you wash your hands, and then you go through a door. And before, they had a person who would stand at the door with one of those little IR readers, and some sort of temperature sensor, and they would point it at your forehead, and then they would say, "You're good, you're good, you're good, you're good. No, you stay," that kind of thing. But that person has since disappeared since I was there the time previous, and I was kind of wondering what was going on. But I noticed that there was a pole with a camera at the top of it that was now in the hallway as you walk either to the pharmacy or back into the area where the blood draw was done. And I kind of wondered if it was just, for tracking who was coming in, because they give you this little username kind of thing, and to make sure that if you end up being COVID positive or something like that, that they can then say, okay, well, these are all the people that need to know. But I wondered what happened to the temperature sensing person. And I think that Dave Gershgorn from OneZero can give us a little potential clarification on what this is and tell us a little bit about fever cameras. Hello and welcome back, Dave Gershgorn. You are easily one of my favorite guests here on Tech News Weekly.
Oh, you're too nice. And you look very nice today, by the way.
Well, thanks. Thanks. I appreciate it. Perfect for the camera. Yeah, the fever camera.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about these. Yeah.
Totally. So this is kind of an emerging industry of fever cameras, where we found that there are actually this trade publication called IPVM, which covers video surveillance companies, put together this list of 170 companies that are now selling these fever cameras. And these fever cameras basically take a thermal image, image after image after image, and make them into a video, and then it extracts those images and is able to tell your temperature. So it is basically, it reads the heat coming back off your skin, finds hot spots. Some of them use the temperature of your forehead. Some of them, the most reliable is your tear ducts. So basically, right in the corners of the inner corners of your eyes. And based on reading the heat that's reflected back, they're able to infer, based on your skin temperature, the internal body temperature. And they're fairly accurate. They're typically the deviation is about like 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like pretty good. And they have thresholds. So say if you're over like 100.3 degrees Fahrenheit, then you are flagged as someone who might have a fever, and you're given additional screening and all of these things.
Yeah. So one of the things that you talk about in the article is kind of the different companies that are making these products available, but kind of like if you go to Amazon and type in baby monitor, you'll see 9 different baby monitors that all look exactly the same and are probably from the same manufacturer, but have different logos screen printed on the side of them. Is that what we're looking at here, where you've got companies who are sort of taking the hardware from a few companies and reworking it? And what are the different packages that are available that you kind of have outlined in the piece?
Totally. I think that's exactly right. So there are about 6 or 7 companies like Fleur, which is based in the U.S., Sanel, Hikvision, Dahua. These are all the Chinese companies. And they make kind of like the base hardware. And so those are like Hikvision's, I believe. It's Hikvision or Sanel. They make the Panda Cam, which has like one big eye and one small eye, and it has like little ears, and it kind of looks like a panda. And it's a thermal image, and it's very cute, but it's also very potentially invasive to privacy. But that's besides the point. Actually, it's not. That's what this is entirely about.
That's the point. That is
so.
The point.
So these companies, they make the hardware, and then dozens and dozens and dozens of other companies take this hardware and they put their own algorithm or software around it. So maybe they sell the, like the monitor and the software that makes it look pretty, or the camera and the stand, or, they'll repackage it in all sorts of different ways and target it at certain companies. So, you can imagine that there are some firms that have good relationships with manufacturing companies. And when a manufacturer is trying to make their facilities up to snuff for social distancing, temperature. This is one of those things that they're going to purchase because they need to maintain the safety of their employees. So there are so many of these companies now. A bunch of these companies also just sell this software. So like if you want to use any kind of thermal camera and then take that image, these companies sell the software that will basically determine what the hottest points of the image are, and then infer the temperature off that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had to look it up, and it literally looks like a panda.
It does.
And so, yeah, you would maybe look at it and go, "Oh, that's so cute," as it takes your face and your temperature information to gather that. So, then let's talk about accuracy or lack thereof, because it sounds like the part of the value that these new companies or the other companies are coming up with are different types of AI or machine learning to add on top. What are some of the things that can sort of get in the way of accurate readings of these cameras, these thermal images?
So some of them have very specific specifications on like how the test needs to be done. So there are a few that you need to be like 16 to 18 inches away from the sensor, like, and the camera goes wrong if you like by multiple degrees, which makes it useless if you're not a very specific distance away. And that can be tough when you are dealing with, a line of 50 people who want to get into your office, but and there's one person and this is your bottleneck, right? So like you're just trying to get people in and out. There are also some, like I said earlier, where some look at the forehead, some look at the eye and interior, and each of those have trade-offs where it's like, so say like I push my hair back, but say someone like puts their hair over their forehead, or someone has bangs or something like that, like the person has to either like pull it up or they have to go to the side, and even if it's partially obscured, you don't know if that's a correct read. And for the tear ducts, I wear glasses, so that would be obscured for me, so I'd have to take off my glasses. And depending on like whether someone was outside and it was cold or outside and it was hot, the IPVM people, what they actually test these cameras themselves, and some of them are fooled, like if you have a cold compress and you put it on your head. So like they're not infallible by any way, but I think basically the big takeaway is that like you need like these things require rigor. Like there are automated ones, and that's where we get to some of the privacy implications where mass fever testing it from like far away. Many people, walking through Grand Central or SFO or any of these places, there are companies that claim to be able to do that as well. And besides the obvious privacy concerns, the accuracy concerns there are very understandable because you have a changing ambient temperature. You have people who, aren't in a controlled environment. You might only get a side profile. So basically the takeaway is that with any kind of implementation of fever detecting technology, there are always going to be caveats, and you're never going to be assured 100% accuracy. And that's compounded because not everybody with coronavirus has a fever anyway, because there are asymptomatic carriers of the disease, as have been shown again and again. So this is a industry that's selling a solution, but what I think is important to keep in mind is that each one of these solutions is deeply, deeply caveated, and requires a lot of rigor for them to be even somewhat effective.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like perhaps it could at the very least be sort of a flag, but then more information would need to be taken to be sure. I'm curious, let's talk about the companies that are creating these things, and where are these mostly being used? I mean, are they in the U.S. as well? Are they in other countries? And are there multiple companies with different countries of origin kind of behind the production of these cameras?
Yeah. So, I mean, FLIR is a company that I tracked even before the pandemic. They do thermal cameras, and they are like pretty much the heir apparent to this industry within the U.S. The trouble in the U.S. for a lot of these Chinese companies is that these, like Dahua and Hikvision specifically, have been sanctioned by the U.S. Department of Commerce for human rights abuses in China on giving facial recognition technology to find and detect Uyghurs, the Muslim ethnic minority that are facing heavy discrimination and abuses in the Xinjiang province. So these companies are not necessarily allowed to sell a lot of technology in the US. There are like all of these like regulations surrounding this now. So for a lot of US companies, FLIR and one or two other thermal camera makers are the only game in town, really. And there are a few, like Dermalog is one from Germany, and there's a smattering of other ones. So you're definitely seeing this in US. I think the GM had said that they were going to put Fever cameras in there. Amazon is doing like the little guns. I don't know if they're necessarily doing. Every company is going to be a little bit hesitant to share all the details of their Fever scanning regimen, but I think it's safe to say that they're in use across the world, and in some places very rigorously, like in China.
Gotcha. So given that we have this blacklist, this federal blacklist due to the human rights abuses, do you know at all whether the repackaging and logofying and sort of adding different software on top of these tools lets them be in places where they would not otherwise get to be? Like, is there a way to sort of circumvent that and still bring those tools into the United States or elsewhere?
That's a good question, one that I don't know 100% the answer to. I believe that there is some mechanism that says that the core technology is like, it looks a little bit upstream. It's like, I don't think that the repackaging pretty much absolves the core technology of being from these original companies. But I would say that it's a very good question that I should probably answer in a future article.
Hey, I'll be looking forward to it. Dave Gershgorn, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to follow you online so they can check out future articles, where do they go to do that?
Go to onezero.medium.com.
Awesome. That's where we'll head. Thanks so much. We will catch you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. All right, coming up, Twitter is, well, they're always in the news, right? Well, they're seeing an upward trend with new users. But those verified DMs, you remember those from last week, or rather the hack? And we wondered if they were having access in any way to verified users' DMs. We know more about that. And Kurt Wagner from Bloomberg is going to come on and join us and talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Monday.com. Now, a team management platform that lets teams plan, manage, and track work in one centralized place. That's what Monday.com is all about. And it's pretty awesome. So you can collaborate with your teammates and track everything your team is working on, wherever you are in any industry. Whether you work with a team of 5 or all the way up to 5,000, even more, Monday.com is the easiest way to keep everyone connected and on track. With so many of your employees are working from home nowadays, of course. Well, Monday.com is a project management platform that makes effective teamwork possible anywhere, and it's ideal for those conditions. So you can keep all your team's work in one place. You can bring your team together wherever you happen to be, and in many cases, they're at home, right? Everybody's at home, so everybody can come together using Monday.com and plan, track, and manage the business as usual. And it's a platform that's super easy to use. You can improve coordination across teams and departments, easily track and manage work so your team always knows who's doing what and by when. Basically, you're keeping everyone connected under a single source of truth. They have centralized communication, so you're not going to need check-in meetings. Remote-ready templates, so you can seamlessly get your team up to speed. You can map out everything visually, and for me, I'm a very visual person, so it really helps me to see things mapped out like that. However you choose to run projects, such as Gantt chart, timeline, Kanban, or spreadsheet, spreadsheet approach tables, Monday.com has you covered either way you want to go. Now, this platform is totally customizable. It adapts to your needs. Monday.com increases productivity as well as increasing efficiency and facilitates transparency to improving your collaboration, which is what it's all about. There's no code automations that let you put your team's workflow on autopilot so you can get alerts, automatic status updates, and project flows that'll keep your team on track and confident in the work that they're doing. You can integrate your team's go-to tools and connect their existing tools to get more work done. So these are the services that you're using already, right? Zoom, Slack, email, calendar, spreadsheets, and so much more. It's all about integrations. You can make data-driven decisions by tracking progress, tracking timelines, budgets, all that stuff, and make key decisions based on real-time data rather than just guesses that you're making. I know for us at TWiT, podcast projects can be very complex. We're scheduling, we're managing data, we're writing out show notes for the live shows so that we can follow in real time. We're assigning, bookings, all this kind of stuff can be managed within Monday.com, and it just makes the job so much easier when you've got that kind of management, especially with everybody spread out in every which direction. So join over 100,000 teams already getting things done with Monday.com. They even have onboarding specialists upon request to help you get the most out of their platform. That's super valuable. They're going to get you up and running if you choose. So can't beat it. Change the way you work online. Let Monday.com take care of what slows you down and free up time to focus on the work that drives you. To start your free 14-day trial, all you got to do is go to Monday.com/twit. That's Monday.com/twit. And we thank Monday.com for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right. Twitter is one of those companies that seems to be doing not too bad in the face of the global pandemic, right? Some companies, this is really affected in the downward trend. At least in the case of users, it seems like Twitter's doing okay right now. Joining us to talk a little bit about this and a few other Twitter tidbits, if you want to call it that, Kurt Wagner from Bloomberg. Welcome back to the show, Kurt.
Hey, how you doing? It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's always good to see you. I'm happy that you could jump on with us today from your home. We're all calling in from our homes. This is just how we roll. I'm sure a lot of Twitter is too.
You have better artwork than I do, though. You got some good stuff there.
Thank you. The years of podcasting will get you some of this artwork too. So let's start with earnings. Earnings, of course, in and of itself, not always the sexiest topic, but Twitter, it sounds like, is doing okay from a user perspective. They're seeing an uptick in users, which it's strange that that's happening now and that it hasn't happened as significantly over the past 4 years as we've had the Trump presidency kind of lean in so heavily on Twitter. Now we're in this pandemic world and things are going up. Why do you think that is? Did they address that in their earnings?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good reminder, honestly, that Twitter is a global company with a lot of users around the world who care about things that aren't U.S. politics, right? So we've been sitting here saying, well, given all the news around Trump and the administration, it seems like we'd be at peak Twitter right now. But the pandemic has showed that there are, a lot of people out there who just don't maybe care about U.S. politics, but who obviously care about the fact that the coronavirus is going wild right now. And so that is really what they pointed to as being the main driver of user growth, is just the current environment that we're in around COVID and the news cycle that creates.
Yeah, I can understand that. Now, how does that translate into? I mean, that's one important metric, of course, Twitter increasing its users. Another aspect of this that's maybe more important is directly their earnings. How are they looking? Like, is that translating into an uptick in earnings, or they're being affected just like all social media is right now with a kind of a downward trend of advertising?
Yeah, well, typically when you see a rise in users, it correlates to a rise in revenue, especially for a company like Twitter, which is an advertising-based company, right? You would think more people on the service means more eyeballs for them to put ads in front of. But right now, revenue is actually down. I believe in the quarter, it was down around 22% from the same period a year ago, which is a huge deal. And Twitter has said this is basically directly correlated to the coronavirus. There are a lot of advertisers who either don't have the money right now to be spending on marketing, or they're cutting back on marketing. And so I think when you just couple all that in, you get kind of the scenario that we've seen from them and that we'll probably see from Facebook as well, right? Which is usage is way up. There's a lot of people who are sitting at home kind of trying to stay connected with family, friends, or trying to learn about the news. And revenue is going to be down because a lot of these businesses that would usually spend just don't have the money right now. So in Twitter's case, I think the stock went up. So I think people were feeling like, okay, if user base is growing, the money will come eventually, right? Maybe even not right now. But certainly one thing went up, and in this case, the revenue was way down.
Maybe it's up because everybody's busy doom scrolling. That's probably what it is. It's probably, I mean, a little truth to that. Now, there's been word of an upcoming subscription offering, which when I look inward, I'm like, gosh, would I pay for Twitter? I mean, I rely on Twitter heavily for my job, and on a daily basis, I use it a lot. But I'm trying to understand like what I would pay Twitter for. Do we have any insight into that, or is it just like, we're looking at new ways to make money, and a subscription offering might be it, but we really know nothing more than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty foolish of them to roll something out that applies to all users, right? Because I think most people don't use Twitter in a way that they'd be willing to pay for, right? They get on, they scroll through, they want to get the news. They're not power users, right? The folks who might be willing to pay are the power users. And historically, the way I've heard subscriptions talked about with the company is related to TweetDeck. So for those who aren't familiar, it's basically a way to use Twitter with all kinds of different feeds and columns. You can set up more alerts. It's just like a way to almost make Twitter like a total screen takeover if you want. It would make sense perhaps that people who care enough about Twitter to use that product might be willing to pay. And other than that, we don't really know. I mean, we've heard speculation, I've heard ideas, but a lot of this is just like people on Twitter just simply weighing in, right? I've heard ideas like, hey, maybe you get a couple tweets per day for free, but if you're tweeting 20 times a day, you got to start paying a couple cents every time you tweet after 5 or something like that. Or maybe you have to pay for special features around live events or something like that. So I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't actually think Twitter knows what this is going to look like. If we take them at their word, this is a very, very new thing for them. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they try and thread that needle, because again, I don't think they're going to get the vast majority of their users to pay. So if they come out with something that tries to, squeeze money out of the general Twitter population, I think they're going to be in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Putting some sort of a limit on how many tweets you could do, people would push back against that heavily, whether they should be tweeting that much or not. Now, last week, the company endured possibly its highest profile hack in company history, I would argue. I mean, this was a huge deal. A number of incredibly notable users, Joe Biden, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, just to name a few, tweeting out a cryptocurrency scam, which we talked about last week. Now we're hearing that the DMs of some of those users were actually exposed and accessed by the attackers, which sounds totally like a catastrophic failure. Like this could really go in a bad direction very quickly. What are your thoughts here? Like, do we know who's been exposed in this way, and what does this mean for Twitter?
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, especially with the election coming up so soon, right? I think that anything that diminishes confidence in Twitter's ability to keep people safe and make sure that sensitive information isn't leaked is really important right now. What we know is they kind of have been sharing stuff, and I'm thinking of it almost like one of those nesting dolls, right? So I think it's like 130 or so accounts in total that were hacked. Then you go down, and it was something like 36 of those 130 had their DMs accessed, and then you go one level lower, and 8 of those 130 had all of their Twitter data downloaded. You can go into your account and kind of hit the download my data button. What we do know about the DM element of it is that there were not DMs accessed from a few of the really prominent current U.S. politicians, notably Joe Biden and then former President Barack Obama. There was a lot of concern, obviously, with the election coming up that maybe, if someone had access to messages on Biden's account, for example, they could be released at a certain time that might influence the election. They could be used in some type of blackmailing situation. I would hope that Joe Biden is not using Twitter DMs for any sensitive conversations, but even non-sensitive stuff could just be either embarrassing or create the perception maybe that stuff is going on that shouldn't be going on, or who knows. So anyway, the good news, I guess, would be that the DMs for those politicians were not accessed, and so we won't necessarily have to worry about that as the election approaches. At least that's the way I'm reading into this. But certainly this hack is a terrible, terrible situation for Twitter. I think it's going to take a little while for them to earn back a lot of the trust, quite frankly, of people who now suddenly think that, they might not be able to use the service for sensitive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, especially on like high profile accounts, I'm sure it changes the way certain people, certain users are using the service, because now they know, oh, wait a minute, it's not impervious. There is, a greater than zero chance that this might happen again in the future. So that changes kind of the thinking, the rationale around using a service. And as we've seen, so many people in very powerful and influential positions relying on Twitter for so many things. So it'll be interesting how that changes things. Finally, I want to touch really quickly on something you wrote this week about the antitrust hearings in DC. Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple CEOs, they're all going to be there to answer questions. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, will not. He's not on the list. Some in Washington are pushing for him to be included. You make the argument in your article that he shouldn't. What's your take here?
Yeah, this came out yesterday. The head Republican on this House Judiciary Committee was saying, hey, Jack Dorsey should be here. And I thought that it was pretty silly, to be honest with you. And it's not silly. It's not that people shouldn't hear from Jack Dorsey. It's certainly not that Twitter is not important. But this is a hearing about antitrust, right? This is a hearing about the largest tech companies in the world and the power that they have over certain markets and certain industries. The reality is that Twitter does not fit into that category. Twitter, for all of its influence socially, I mean, it's obviously a incredibly powerful service, and that it's also the most popular service for the president of the United States, which is a big deal. But it does not have the kind of market power of any of these other companies. I think I had a stat in that it was actually a newsletter this morning that I think Google and Facebook combined for something like close to 53% of the U.S. digital ad market. Twitter is 1%. They're just not even in the same ballpark as these other companies. And so the reason it stood out to me as problematic is I think it's a good thing that we're talking about antitrust. I think it's good that these CEOs are going to answer questions. And I worried that if Twitter was included, it would totally distract from some real legitimate antitrust stuff as people start asking Twitter about conservative bias or their policies around hate speech or whatever it may be. Again, important conversations, just not for this particular hearing. And it would have been a total distraction from what we really want to know, right? Which is like, how are these companies handling their massive power?
Which is not even to say that the hearings won't be what they've been, the few times that we've seen these in the past, which really kind of seems very surface level, like finger wagging, not a whole lot more to begin with. This helps us get closer to maybe the accountability that some people are looking for. But I would argue that we're probably going to see a lot more of the same as far as what we've seen in the past. I hope that they are able to change their mind as far as that's concerned.
I think you're right. I mean, this is my argument here kind of takes for granted the fact that this would actually be a real serious conversation otherwise, right? Which, as you point out, is not necessarily the case. So I would be lying if I said that I'm sitting here expecting that we're all going to like learn the real ins and outs of these businesses, right? You don't bring 4 people to one hearing and expect that you're really going to be able to drill down deep on any one of their particular issues. So, to your point, we probably won't learn a lot anyway, but at least I'm glad we're not going to have the additional distraction of having Jack Dorsey in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Kurt, it's always a pleasure getting you on the show. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us. Kurt Wagner, of course, writes for Bloomberg.com. Kurt, if people want to find you online, where can they do so?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a while. It's good to be back. I'm on Twitter. I'm at KurtWagner8. And as you mentioned, I write for Bloomberg. So you can go to Bloomberg.com and all my stories are there.
Right on. Kurt, thank you again. Take care. Be safe. We'll see you soon.
Same to you. See you, Jason.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Kurt. Up next, our stories of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Barracuda. Barracuda is along with having a very, very cool name. Like, let's just go ahead and admit that. Barracuda is the provider of cloud-enabled enterprise-grade security solutions that protect email, networks, data, and applications. Suddenly, you've got dozens, hundreds, or maybe thousands of employees that are working remotely. Each one of them is getting tons of emails every day, and you're starting to sweat thinking about this. It's making them vulnerable. 91% of all cyber attacks start in an email. Spear phishing, ransomware, account takeover, conversation hijacking. Multiply that by how many employees times how many emails? Oof. It gets kind of scary. One click on the wrong email can cost you your money, your customers, and your reputation. Barracuda researchers have seen a steady increase in the number of coronavirus-related spear phishing attacks since January, and they've observed a recent spike of 667% in this type of attack since the end of February. Get the protection you need for your company with Barracuda Total Email Protection. It includes all-in-one email security, backup, and archiving, AI-based protection from spear phishing, account takeover, and business email compromise, an automated incident response that gives you options to quickly and efficiently address attacks, and security awareness training to educate your workforce so your employees can be the first line of defense against attacks. It is fantastic for any kind of email threat, of any phishing attempt. In fact, right now there are new attacks impersonating organizations like the World Health Organization. Attackers utilize domain spoofing and promise information relating to the coronavirus in an attempt to trick users into a phishing scam. Ensure the safety and security of your business with Barracuda. To uncover the threats hiding in your inbox, get a secure, free email threat scan of your Office 365 account risk-free at barracuda.com/TNW. That's barracuda.com/TNW. Barracuda, your journey secured.
Thank you, Barracuda.
Yes, thank you. Oh, yeah, I forgot. You're first. Tell me your story of the week, Jason.
Okay. Well, mine's a little light, I would say, compared to some of my other stories of the week. But I guess I'm a sucker for when there are new opportunities or options for people to get like free media. Like those stories always like kind of wake me up a little bit because I just, free and media, and especially when you're talking 80 plus channels, I thought this was interesting. Plex announced the addition of a whole slew, more than 80 channels of free TV content for its users. Granted, none of them are big name channels that you would find in your standard like cable service or over the air antenna, that sort of thing. But it's a live TV service that offers all those channels that cover the spectrum. You've got news, you've got kids content, movies, documentaries, game shows, music videos, a whole bunch of different categories and directions, all laid out kind of using the Plex app and the Plex experience in a format that resembles a true TV service. So you've got a guide with the times of all the programming laid out on an hour-by-hour basis. And, for all intents and purposes, it is a live TV service, more than 80 channels that you can get for free through using Plex. And I just, sure, they're not networks that we're used to seeing. Some of the networks include Reuters TV, Yahoo Finance, Kidoodle for kid content, Docurama, Game Show Central, Gravitas Movies, and the Bob Ross channel, which everybody's going to be flocking to the Bob Ross channel.
I want that so much. It would be so peaceful.
They aren't necessarily networks that everybody's like, oh my goodness, I'd sign up, for YouTube TV just for that network. But in combination, when you're talking 80 plus channels and you've got a full kind of guide that you can flip through to find certain things, you might find something in there that is actually very, very interesting. If you're looking to save money and you don't mind not having the networks that you're used to, and this is an alternative to check out, and it's totally free. So I think that's a win-win.
Yeah, it sounds like it to me. Well, I was just going to say, I've been a Plex person, a Plex, lifetime subscriber for a very long time. And it's never disappointed. And this is exciting to add this to the list. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think some families are going to, like families especially, are going to be happy to have some of the children's content. The thing is, you can't DVR this content, so it's only live. So if you're using Plex to manage your OTA antenna and as a DVR kind of system and stuff, this is really just like tuning in live. They're going to be integrating this content into the experience for your over-the-air antenna inputs that come into the app as well. So there's going to be more integration. They're going to be adding channels soon. And it's rolling out in U.S. and international markets, which in the U.S., it's relatively common to see free offerings like this. In international markets, sometimes it's pretty hard to find this stuff. So they're actually including this for international markets, which is nice as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That you can get it all over the place. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and of course, it's worth noting, Plex has been a sponsor of TWiT in the past, and we do appreciate them there. But like I said, I've been a Plex customer for a very long time, and anytime they come out with something new, it always seems to add to the amazingness that is that Plex package. Speaking of being a customer of something, I found this story yesterday and was a little bit concerned. BuzzFeed has a report out saying hundreds of thousands of Instacart customers' personal data is being sold online. So Instacart is this fantabulous service that lets you order groceries online and have them delivered to your door. It will find somebody who will be your shopper. They go into the store, they get all of your items. If they can't find the item, they can choose a replacement for it. Then you get notified in the app and you can say, oh yeah, this is a good replacement, or oh no, this is a bad replacement, and everything in between. It's a fantastic service, and it's helped me in this time where I'm trying not to leave the house as often as I possibly can to stick with that. Now, with all of that being said, names, credit card information, addresses, and transactions as recently as yesterday, So July 22nd, on July 22nd, this article was published. So they were saying as recently as July 21st of 2020, this information was showing up online. For its part, Instacart says this information is not due to a breach of its data rather. The company says no one's breached. There's not been a data breach here, but rather they think that the customers' data is being gathered through other means, and it just so happens to line up with Instacart and customers of Instacart. That's a little bit weird. Doesn't quite make sense that, it seems to be that it's Instacart customers and sort of that data specifically. But I, of course, recommend that everyone go in and change their password on their Instacart account to immediately sort of mitigate those effects. And if you are using a credit card with it, this is a good time to mention privacy, which has been a sponsor of the network, because that helped me. I had a privacy card, which is a card that is locked to a specific a specific company or online service that you use. And so I was able to just remove that card and then create a new one that could be locked in with Instacart. And that way, there was no chance of my credit card information being published online for then someone to grab and use for their own nefarious purposes. So yeah, definitely go in and change your passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, and be aware of your bank account activity over the coming weeks and months if you are an Instacart user. And here's the important thing to note. If you have ever ordered groceries online from your favorite grocery store, or I know not Sam's Club. What is the California Sam's Club? Costco. Yeah, Costco. If you've ever ordered groceries from Costco online or some of these other ones, many of them will use a third-party grocery delivery service that 9 times out of 10 ends up being Instacart. So it is still a chance that if you've ordered groceries online, you should be aware of your passwords and things like that, and you might want to update. This is just sort of a public bulletin of being careful. Have you ever ordered groceries online? Have you used Instacart?
We actually haven't done the online grocery ordering, and Instacart I have not used. I know that I remember, when we were actually going into the studio on a regular basis that you had mentioned that you'd used Instacart, but you use a lot of, you use other food delivery services. It's just not a thing that I ever think to do. It's just not part of my routine. We've got our process for going to the grocery store and doing all that. So we just kind of do that and hope for the best.
Yeah. So I used, when I lived in Missouri, I used it occasionally, but I always felt guilty about using it because I felt there and at the time when nothing was going on, that it was kind of like, wow, I should really be letting these little slots that they have be reserved for people who literally can't leave their home or can't go to the grocery store. And I feel kind of lazy about it. But in this time, I feel a lot, I don't feel bad about it at all because it's potentially saving lives by doing so, by limiting contact. But I had not used Instacart itself before until one night I was doing like an online little chat with some friends. And so we were all sitting around on Zoom, just hanging out. And I mentioned, man, I really feel like having some chocolate right now. And I don't have any chocolate. And I said, I can't order from Prime now because it's going to take, of course, at least a day. And also I have to order so much in order for it to be worth it or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, why don't you use Instacart? And I thought, I don't know if that's available in Northern California, but I went online and I looked, and it was really cool because literally you see the person as they're shopping. It shows, here are the items they're still looking for. Here are the items that they found that are in the cart. It sort of gives you every step of the way, every single moment of how the grocery shopping is going, and offering, like I said, some options for, I do want this or I don't want this. So yeah, they ended up selling me pretty quickly on being a subscriber to Instacart's service. And it was helpful when I needed to get some over-the-counter medicine the other day too, like some normal medicine that like headache medicine or something like that, where normally, you'd have to make a run to the store, you're exposing yourself and stuff like that. You've got this person who throughout the day is doing this thing, maintaining the proper protection. And so, yeah, it was really nice to be able to use, but with many users' data being shared, it was kind of a concern of mine. So yeah, if you've ordered groceries online through anything but like Prime Now, which of course is using Amazon's own services, you might want to take a look and make sure that you're protected and your information's been updated and passwords changed.
I'm realizing that I'm lying when I say I have not done grocery delivery, because I did in the late 90s with a company called Webvan. Which Webvan and another company called Cosmo back in between 98 and 2001, those were the companies during the .com bubble that were all about this. They were obviously ahead of their time. And they were actually, I remember it being really cool that you could do that, Yeah. But it completely exploded, when the .com bubble burst. They, filed for bankruptcy and they went away for years. And then now we have the resurgence that's actually working. But yes, I did use Webvan and Cosmo back way back when, and that was the beginning of what we have now, as far as that's concerned.
That's so cool.
It was pretty sweet. I do remember. Let's see here. I think we've reached the end, haven't we? That's it. We're going to end with food delivery. So make sure and order your food either online or go there. The point is, eat something, because you look like you need some food right now. Eat something. Take care of yourself, okay?
That is what we were meant to get out of this. Absolutely.
Yes, that's the overall point. Is it's lunchtime and I'm hungry. So
same.
Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday right before lunch at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats, as well as link out to YouTube to subscribe there. Do it. twit.tv/TNW.
You, of course, can be a part of the show by emailing us. It's tnw@twit.tv. And, of course, follow us on social media at Twit on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at Twit Talk on TikTok. I am at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUAHUA.coffee. And, of course, follow and subscribe to Hands on iOS, twit.tv/HOI, to get everything you need to know about iOS, including this episode that'll be coming out later today, how to install and why you should install a virtual private network or VPN. What about you, Jason?
Yes. At Jason Howell on Twitter. One of my other shows, Hands on Android, published this morning. Episode 23 is on root. If you root your Android device and what you get out of app backup if you've got a rooted device. It's a deeper backup that copies basically everything about all the apps on your device. You might not have a rooted phone, but you kind of want to see what the benefits are of that. So that's twit.tv/HOA, and you can check that out for yourself. I hope that you do. Big thanks to everyone who helps us do the show each and every week. John, Burke, all the folks at the studio that go in safely and wear a mask and everything. We appreciate that you guys do that in order to get these shows turned around. And thanks to you for watching and listening each and every week. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, host at TWiT TV. Got a question for you. Have you gotten tired of how bad your photos are looking every time you post them to Instagram? Better yet, have you gotten yourself a new camera and you can't quite figure out why the images just don't look that good? Well, I have a solution for you. It's my show, Hands on Photography. Each and every Thursday, I sit down and share different tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer and a better post processor. So subscribe today at twit.tv/hop to learn more.